This Stealing the Mind Bible Conference presentation is by Tom Horn and is entitled Artificial Intelligence and the Return of the Nephilim. For a free catalog of over 250 awesome Bible studies on DVD or CD, call Compass at 1-800-977-2177 or on the web at compass.org.
Because what I want to talk to you about is the coming technological singularity. I want to talk to you about transhumanism. I want to talk to you about the coming human enhancement revolution. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there is a powerful and growing group of individuals on earth today, including here in the United States. In fact, we may be one of the trendsetters besides Britain, who intend to fix a whole lot more about the human condition than just my balding head. They are called transhumanists. And for those of you who do not know immediately what I mean when I use the term transhumanist or transhumanism, I am referring to a quickly growing cultural movement that imagines that we now have it within our grasp, within our power. We have the technocratic ability within our reach now. What we call in our book, Forbidden Gates, GRIN technologies, genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology. And now you could turn that to GRINs because we've just unleashed synthetic biology in the last 24 months, a la the J. Craig Venter community. But the bottom line is we now believe that we hold it within our grasp to create a new form of human. Proto-humans, Homo superior, a better version of humanity than what God made. And ladies and gentlemen, by the end of this presentation, you'll know that this is coming from the highest think tanks in the world. It's coming from the number one policy think tanks that bend the ear of lawmakers and the U.S. government and the presidential office. It is coming from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's coming from the Pentagon, from the Department of Defense, from the European intelligence bureaus, from the highest levels of intelligence in the United States, who are now telling us in their own published reports. And believe me, if this is the stuff they're releasing for public consumption and we can read it, I would hate to think how far ahead in their technology they already are in private contracts that are offshore in Latin America. When I was doing the research for Apollyon Rising 2012, a friend of mine, his brother works for the Monsanto organization, and he is a patent holder for one of the Terminator seeds. And he told me, Tom, everything you're saying about the genetically modified crops is really important, but you haven't scratched the surface. He said in Latin America, where our military has contracts, they're doing things that the American public would shudder to know how far ahead they are in terms of the application of human-animal chimera research. Well, in any case, I spoke at the Ohio Science and Supernatural Conference, and I went there believing the same thing that I have assumed to some extent about also people in Colorado, though you do tend to be ahead of the curve, and I have saw some of the efforts in Colorado that are anti-genetic modification organisms and how you're fighting that in your state. But in any case, I went to Ohio being completely convinced that the average Ohioan was unaware that right there in their state, which then of course means right here in your country, in recent years, the NIH, that is the National Institute of Health, this is the largest institute in America that doles out your tax dollars for health-related research purposes, how that in recent years they had provided to Case Western Reserve Law School in Ohio a grant of nearly $1 million, $773,000, to the lead professor there by the name of Professor Maxwell Mellman, ladies and gentlemen, for one purpose, and that is to lead a team of law professors, bioethicists, geneticists, over a 24-month period to begin establishing the guidelines that will be used for extending the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights privileges to human non-humans, and furthermore to establish the protocol for using actual human subjects in what is now being called the next step in human evolution, and that is genetic enhancement of humans. Well, here's a copy of the medical news today. Hopefully you can read that. I've blown it up over here a little bit better. Hopefully most of you can read that. But here is the actual press release. Case Law School received $773,000 NIH grant to develop guidelines for genetic enhancement research. And notice what it says here. Maxwell Melman, professor of bioethics in Case School of Medicine, will lead a team of law professors, physicians, and bioethicists in a 2-year project to develop standards for tests on human subjects in research that involves the use of genetic technologies to enhance normal individuals, to make them smarter, stronger, and notice this little eugenic caveat here, better looking. So en route to becoming demigods, once we get all this Terminator enhanced eyesight, we sure don't want the scenery filled up with a lot of ugly people. So as they gazelle across buildings with a single bound, we want them to be pretty on their landing. Well, in any case, the research period occurred. The research period ended 18 months ago. I've been at the forefront of this technological research for the past decade and a half. That's why I'm being invited to address the issue in so many different places, because I also happen to be a believer in biblical prophecy. I'm a biblical literalist. I believe in the inspired Word of God. I believe that there is no other name given under heaven whereby men can be saved except Christ Jesus the Lord. And I also believe a day is coming, someday, in which, transhuman or not, every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that Jesus Christ is the Lord. Yeah, you better say, man, at least you Baptist ones. Well, no backslidden Baptist in here bugging me. Where was I at? Oh, so it came and it went, and then I've been waiting with bated breath for the published report that I contributed to and that you contributed to. I wanted to know, in what way are the guidelines being established? In what way are we establishing protocols for human subjects to be used for the next step in human evolution as it regards genetic enhancement? And so far, no published report has come forward. But I will tell you this, that immediately upon the conclusion of this 24-month period, Professor Melman began traveling the United States of America, where he is now going, to our colleges and our universities, and he is offering 2 specific lectures to fill the heads of these young skulls full of mush, as Limbaugh likes to refer to them. One is called Directed Evolution, Public Policy and Enhancement. Now catch that loaded phrase. Directed Evolution, Public Policy and Enhancement, and the second title is Transhumanism and the Future of Democracy. So, ladies and gentlemen, among the elite, among the academics, and this is happening, by the way, in all of our law schools, the number one policy think tank in the world, the Brookings Institute, for instance, right now is writing a new series called The Future of the Constitution. You can go to the Brookings Institute website, read these papers for yourself, but especially read white paper number 9 and white paper number 10, in which they are outlining the legal argument that within the next decade, we will begin creating genetically engineered homosexual communities, and because they are genetically engineered to be predisposed to a homosexual lifestyle and they are not humans, we cannot presume that the constitutional privileges that were granted to us, our old laws are based on inalienable rights given to us from our Creator. Well, God is not their creator. This is what the Brookings Institute is saying. We are their creator, and therefore we will need to extend to them the same privileges so they can be protected by law. We're literally talking about a gay Gattaca, and the Brookings Institute, number one policy think tank in the world, number one policy think tank in the United States of America. But you're going to find out, if we have time, as I'm trying to buzz through all these very fast. Here in Ohio, and that they may be getting a leg up on you, fear not, right here in Colorado. I Googled this just before I came here. There were so many stories, I just didn't even want to take time to list them. Genetically modified plants and animals being sniffed, created that'll sniff out explosives being raised in Colorado. Here's a Colorado daily where a Boulder councilman is decrying that genetically modified crops are being raised on land owned by the county. Here is the University of Colorado, in which they've got a program where your high schoolers here in Colorado, grades 9 through 12, can go and they too can learn how to alter God's creation. Here's an excerpt. Recent and ongoing technological advances now allow scientists to make targeted modifications to specific genes to create desired phenotypic, I've underlined that for a reason, outcomes in an organism. Using a genetic key and a hands-on DNA model, students will manipulate genes and predict the effects of genetic modification in a given organism. So students at the 9th grade, when I was in the 9th grade, the last thing we were thinking about was how we were going to undo God's creation. So boy, one generation later, and the IGM competition is happening on college campuses right now for the last 5 years. College kids creating new novel forms of life that actually fulfill task requirements, so they're called machines, genetically made machines. Anyway, this Pandora's box is opened, and security agents are staying up now at night terrified, because gene sequencing machines can be bought for almost nothing. You can sequence a gene for $100 now, and all of this open source information that's being made known to terrorists has security experts up at night just knowing that we are on borrowed time right now for the moment in which some task-fulfilling new form of life is going to do something that the rest of us don't want it to do. And it's a very good time, ladies and gentlemen, to know whose side you are on, because from the days of the plagues in ancient Egypt until today, God has a way of protecting those who belong to Him. And I want to know that the blood is upon my doorposts, so that when the death angel comes through town, he will pass over me. I still believe that God is capable of doing that, but we could be facing some horrific times, and this is why it is my mission to get the church awake to this issue. You know why? Because I've went head-to-head with the world's leading transhumanists, with the number one institutes, the think tanks, if you will, for transhumanists. Hardly a transhuman conference goes on now that they're not bad-mouthing Tom Horn. The former head of the World Transhumanist Association, Dr. James Hughes, is going to be in a documentary film that we are producing. He's agreed to do it, but recently on the IEET, he said, Tom Horn is a very smart man, he's a very funny man, but I think he might be crazy. But the point is, we have entered an ideological contest. We are in a war now for the mind of a generation. And it's my prayer, and I'm not naive enough to believe that some great revival will occur so that every person in every church, everywhere, and every pastor is suddenly going to awake to these issues. I don't care about that. What I care about is those who God has put His hand upon their shoulder and does intend to use them to raise the issues, because, folks, if we engage, our numbers are far superior to theirs, and I believe that the Church of Jesus Christ is the power against which the gates of hell will not prevail. If we get involved, we win, period. All right, but surely, Tom, these must just be isolated news stories, right? I wish that was the case, and I wished I had 10 hours to stand here and page through peer-reviewed medical journals, line items in this year's DARPA budget for where the millions of dollars are set aside for altering soldier DNA. All right, and so this is not an overstatement, honestly. I have thousands of pages of research documents. Most of everything I ever deal with comes directly from the government or some institution that is recognized by the government, because I don't ever want anybody to say that it was spurious. Oh yeah, but he's quoting Weekly World News. I mean, so what? So, but I do want to, just so you know I'm not making this up, I'll page through some of these based on how much time I have. I'll tell you what some of them mean. Here's the 2010 newest State of the Future report from the Millennium Project. The Millennium Project was founded in 1996 after a 3-year feasibility study with the United Nations University, the Smithsonian Institute, Futures Group International, and the American Council for the UNU. It's a global futurist research think tank of futurist scholars, business planners, and policymakers who work for international organizations, governments including the United States and Europe and Australia and China, corporations, non-governmental organizations, and universities. Here's a quick excerpt from their most recent report. As computer code is written to create software to augment human capabilities, so too genetic code will be written to create life forms to augment civilization. You are going to become the Borg, in other words. The first part of this, as computer code is written to create software to augment human capabilities, is talking about how the military, including the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, the way out arm of the U.S. military, have, for the past few decades, literally poured billions of dollars into one Project AIM, and that is to decipher the secret language of the brain. They have wanted to know, how does the neuron pulses of the brain, how does the neural code of the brain function? As I'm standing up here talking, you're sitting down there, you're listening to me. And the neuron pulses, synaptic flashes are occurring all throughout your brain. You're hearing me, you're interpreting what I'm saying, you're listening, you're believing or you're not believing, you're experiencing emotions, or you're hot, or you wish I'd shut up so you could get up and go eat an ice cream. Whatever it is that is happening, this is the secret language of the brain, and it's the most complex thing. And so our military has had an interest in being able to control thought and other things like that, and so they've poured billions of dollars into research, creating algorithms so that they can break down the syntax, the complicated communication rules that cause all of that to actually accurately mean something. Well, you've probably, like at YouTube, you saw some of these videos where perhaps there's a racist monkey, and it's got a chip implanted in the hippocampus of its brain, and it's got wires coming out of its brain to a computer system. Those were one of the very early tests that are now known to the public, in which a monkey was learning to move a computer cursor around on a screen by thought alone. And by doing these early experiments, they slowly, through this daunting task, were able to break down and actually begin recreating these complex communication rules, until finally, over the last 36 months, they pretty much have deciphered, if you will, the neural code. In fact, it's advancing so quickly that now the technology has moved extracranial. There's no longer a need to put a chip inside the brain. In fact, wearing a device no larger than this little headset I'm wearing, this is how fast it's developing. Games systems makers like Sega or whatever are developing these new game systems where children can put a headset on and it will read the neuron pulses of their brain, and then digitally it'll communicate that information to the game system where it's reinterpreted. It's transmitted as digital code, strings of ones and zeros, then it's reassembled, and kids are going to know how to play games. In fact, I saw a commercial. The day I left to come here, I saw a commercial on TV, you might have saw this, where they're talking about future televisions and that we're going to control them with our mind, just with thought alone. Did you see those articles? And the first thing in my mind was, really? We're not already big, fat enough couch potatoes that the next step is, by thought alone, I'll command my robot droid to bring me another bag of chips and I'll change the channel. I mean, by thought alone. But that's where it's going. It's very quick. Well, I read a University of Chicago report recently where the military now in Afghanistan are trialing a device no bigger than a Bluetooth. And it sets above a soldier's ear. It reads the neural pulses of their mind. It wirelessly transmits that in digital code to a receiver where it's reinterpreted. And they're saying now that within the next 3 to 4 years, our soldiers will have the technology in hand to have a synthetic form of telepathy, where they'll be able to communicate with one another by thought alone. And then the next step is a synthetic form of telekinesis, where they'll be able to move objects, war-fighting machines, drones, pilotless combat vehicles, where they'll wear the helmets. You've probably seen the helmets if you've paid any attention to this news. It's got a screen in front of them that can remotely show them the battlefield, or if it's being projected from a drone, they can see overhead the battlefield below, and by thought alone, they can tell the drone what to do, drop a bomb, blah, blah, blah. So it's Terminator technology. But here's what the state of the future is saying. As the computer code is written to create the software that will thus augment our human capabilities, there is a problem that's going to develop. Our gray matter, like God made it, won't keep up with their ambitions according to them. Very soon, our capacity to process thought, once we reach technological singularity, aka Ray Kurzweil, in which we've got artificial intelligence systems that will be trillions of times faster and smarter than humans, we will not be able to keep up with all that this technology holds out in terms of a promise. Well, what is the answer? Augment humans. We begin altering our matter, cognitively altering ourselves, and then there will also be a degree to which we will literally begin to create life forms, nanobots, and other genetic constructs that then will be integrated with our bodies, with our systems, in order to enhance our capacity and to further enable our capability to be able to communicate with the Borg, with the mothership. And you think, by the way, when I'm talking about this, it's so easy to sit back and say, really? Uh-huh. Okay. I can't even get the radio in my car to work. But what you have to understand is that brilliant men, Kurzweil is a brilliant man, whether you agree with him or not. He is a proven futurist. Most of his predictions have come true. And when he's predicting that within the next 20 to 30 years we will reach technological singularity, in one heartbeat, everything you know will change in one day. And that's where professors like Hugo de Garis tell us, and you better not hope that this godlike, massively intelligent machine don't look at us like a pest, because if it does, it could decide in one heartbeat to wipe us out. And what I think prophetically is that we could be building the agents that are going to bring about Armageddon. In fact, what's really funny is if you read Hugo de Garis, who is an atheist, he hates the idea of theism, of a personal God. And yet when you read his book, you can't escape that he's a prophet running from his calling, because he is literally describing Armageddon from the book of Revelation. I've got to go quickly. Your children will live to see man merge with machines, but will it save or destroy us? From the largest online article out of the UK. You should, by the way, Google and download and read this article from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Regardless of what you think of the Lutherans, this is a fantastic article. Margaret McLean talking about Professor Gregory Stock. Gregory Stock is a world-famous transhumanist. He is also bending the ear of important institutions and government organizations around the world, and what he's advocating for is what is called germline genetic engineering. Germline genetic engineering is the kind of engineering you would do if you wanted to permanently and forever alter all downline offspring of the human race. If you make an alteration, let's say I go into my local genetics lab in a couple of years from now and have them enhance my leg or something, that would not become a part of my genotype. Well, by the way, sports figures right now, you've heard of gene doping. This is what they're doing. They get injected with genes to try to improve some kind of performance modification. But that kind of genetic tinkering does not become a part of your genotype. Therefore, you have children. That kind of alteration doesn't pass on to your children. But germline genetic engineering, it does. This happens at the earliest level, at the sperm level, at the egg level, or at the earliest embryonic level. And here's what Professor Gregory Stock is saying. We know that Homo sapien, that's you, is not the final word in primate evolution, but few, insert here the church, have yet grasped that we are on the cusp of profound biological change, poised to transcend our current form and character on a journey to destinations of new imagination. Personally, I think this is old, not new. Hey, here's the Scientific American. Triple helix, designing a new molecule of life. You didn't even know your double helix was outdated, did you? Here you sit, Ford Pintos, Chevy Chevettes, not even knowing that your benevolent overlords are working on your Cadillac upgrades. Here's Christianity today. The techno-sapiens are coming. When God fashioned man and woman, he called his creation very good. Transhumanists say that by manipulating our bodies with microscopic tools, we can do better. Are we ready for the great debate? This is important that I point out that this is Reuters. Otherwise, you might have thought this really was Weekly World News. This is Reuters. This article goes back for 24 months. There's specifically why I picked it, though, for this presentation. Scientists want debate on animals with human genes. And notice this paragraph. A mouse that can speak. A monkey with Down's syndrome. Dogs with human hands or feet. British scientists want to know if such experiments are acceptable if they go too far in the name of medical research. What this is about, here's the fast backstory. These scientists are involved in the pharmaceutical industry in Britain. I won't go into explaining why they create human-animal chimeras for experimental purposes. There are pharmaceutical reasons for drug testing that they do that, but I won't bog down my time with that explanation, just to suffice to say that they do. And these scientists had gone to the government of Britain. They were wanting to get public funds, tax dollars, to fund their research in the creation of human-animal chimeras. This created an uproar, especially among the pro-life community in Britain, who did not want their tax dollars being used to create part humans, part animals at the embryonic level for experiments. So they went, and what the government of Britain decided to do was host what they called the embryology discussions, in which they invited in all kinds of disciplines, scientists, members of the pharmaceutical empires, large corporations, lay people. Even, by the way, they invited in laity, religious people, and the Vatican sent in 2 bishops. And you can Google this story and read it for yourself. One of the bishops who testified before the embryology discussions said that if a woman participates in these experiments through providing egg or ovum, and then later grows a crisis of conscience and wants to raise this half animal, half child as her own child, she ought to have the right to do so. So it illustrated the kind of tortured logic. Anyway, the British embryology discussions came to an end. The government of Britain began passing out on case-by-case basis money to the pharmaceutical industry for the creation of human-animal chimeras. Well, 24 months ago, these scientists were back. And what they were saying was, you've gotten used to it. It's no longer an uproar. We're using your money for this. The drip, 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 that happens over time. And so the law of diminishing returns. And so now what we would like to know is, could we start some islands of Dr. Moreau? Could we start raising to full maturity, part human, part animals, for long-term research purposes? And if you Google this article and read it, you'll find out, first of all, that they hint that some of their colleagues are doing it anyway already, so you might as well let us have the bucks, folks. And secondly, that they are fully comfortable with up to 50% integration. See, this is another misnomer that many people believe the human-animal chimera research is portions of human genetics inside of an animal that are so minute as to be excusable. What they were admitting is up to 50% human animals were being created. Well, interestingly, just last month, the Academy of Medical Sciences in Britain, this is a big story, folks, admitted that the science is happening, that in fact it's advancing so quickly that an international regulatory commission is needed now to oversee the creation of mature human-animal chimeras. There are several things I want you to note very quickly here. First of all, look at the cover of their presentation here. This is the Academy of Medical Science. I don't know if you can read that, animals containing human material. But in the middle is a human. Here's the double helix. But look at this, telescope lens, a microscope lens on this side and also on this side. And in the microscope lens is every kind of known animal. Monkeys, fish, dogs, cows, all being integrated, see this line, into the human genetic, out of the back of the human's genetics, coming back out. And what this report is talking about is the integration of human genetic material with animals, but ultimately what the opposite of that. In fact, there is a primetime television show that I am under contract not to say anything about. It's one of the biggest shows on television right now. And when I get off of this trip and back, they'll be meeting with me for 2 days, and we're going to be documenting some stuff with some people you know very well into this whole subject matter and how fast, how quickly, and what also is happening here in the United States. But look at their summary. This report considers research that involves the introduction of human DNA sequences into animals or the mixing of human and animal cells or tissues to create entities we refer to as animals containing human material. Such approaches, now this is an interesting admission, such approaches are long established and thousands of different ACHM have been used in biomedical research, yet they have received relatively little public discussion. Well, what kind of ACMH experiments are they talking about? By the way, if you email me, I'll send you their report. I'll email it to you. I've got a 200-page report in PDF. I'll send it to you. And you'll see for yourself that they talk about the extensive modification of the brain of an animal by implantation of human-derived cells, which might result in altered cognitive capacity approaching human consciousness or sentience or human-like behavioral capabilities. Secondly, situations where functional human gametes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about reproductive cells in humans and animals. Human gametes might develop from precursor cell types in an animal, and where fertilization between humans and animal gametes then might occur. I think the book of Leviticus has something to say about this. Cellular or genetic modifications which could result in animals with aspects of human-like appearance, skin type, limb or facial structure, or characteristics such as speech. Well, is such science actually happening around the world? One day after the Academy of Medical Science published their report, the Mail Online reported that at least 150 human-animal hybrids had been grown in UK labs. But it isn't just Britain. The United States published its own similar report, beating the UK by 20 years, I can can also send you this report in which 20 years ago they were talking about splicing life, the social and ethical issues of genetic engineering of human beings, interfacing humans with nature and animals, including new forms of life, and they didn't even have the term synthetic biology then, but they had imagined it. Now, I wished, by the way, that I could spend an hour talking to you about the esoteric side of this, because there's something very strange happening, and I will run out of time today and not have time to talk about it. But ancient occultic communities around the world were focused on the year 2012 as a time which they believed after which a new form of humanity would emerge upon the earth. And I find it to be startling that for more than 20 years, the U.S. government reports have also targeted the year 2012, after which they imagine a new form of humanity emerging upon the earth. The Washington Post, mice, men, and in-between, scientists debate blending of human and animal forms. The New York Times, merely human, that's so yesterday. Monsters, Inc., the Pentagon plan to create mutant super soldiers. Bioethics and human dignity, the future of the human species. Discovery News, part human, part machine transistors devised. There's the danger room. Pentagon looks to breed immortal synthetic organisms. If you have the book, or if you want to just go out there and open one and look in it, the book Forbidden Gates is my new best-selling book on this subject. I copied 2 of the pages out of this year's DARPA 2011 presidentially approved budget, in which they have set aside millions of dollars for editing soldier DNA, and secondly, for creating what this article here is about, a project called Biodesign. This is an amazing thing. DARPA is trying to figure out how to get around cellular death. Now, when you really think about what they're saying, Bill, they're trying to figure out how to undo the curse that God placed on humanity at the fall. Because what they want is immortal life, but they don't want transcendence from God. This is Luciferian at its heart. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High. And the Watchers who came down, and because they couldn't create as he did, decided they would distort everything he had made. And the ancient stories and the legends that are from around the world of powerful fallen angels, known as genetic scientists by me, known as the Watchers, who came down and corrupted animal flesh, corrupted human flesh. The Bible tells us the cause of the flood was that all flesh, both man and beast, had been corrupted. This is a story from around the world. Well, it's back. We're back. We like the Watchers. They're our pals. They're whispering in our ears, and we're going to follow them. This was a very important article. It came out 3 years ago. Top Pentagon scientists fear brain-modified foes. This was important because it was the very first time that the public learned that the highest level of intelligence in the United States, including the Jasons, these are the celebrated scientists that bend the ears of the Pentagon, are now viewing the human enhancement revolution as the next arms race. And it's not just this report. They have a new report that you could Google and read called The $100 Genome, Implications for the Department of Defense, in which the Jasons are now telling our military communities, the Pentagon and the Department of Defense specifically, that we now have less than 12 months to get ahead in the human enhancement technology field, or we will fall unrecoverably, that's their language, unrecoverably in this new arms race. Well, Discovery Magazine looked at it and called it the most dangerous idea. We're reaching the knee of the exponential curve now. It's accelerating quickly. It's on fast forward. Look at this genetic machine, human DNA coming in and out here being spat out, all kinds of alien green new forms of life. Automatic genetic tinkering is just the start. This machine could be used to rewrite the language of life and create new species of humans. I'm just going to go through these. There's so many more. Oh, this one here, by the way, New York Times talking about how we are now entering into the hybrid age. We had the Iron Age, we had the post-industrial age, we had the industrial age, we had the information age with the dawn of the internet, and now we're entering into the hybrid age in which all life, plants, animals, humans, everything is going to be hybridized. Download this report. You paid for it, so you should read it. 500 pages from the U.S. government 10 years ago, speculating that within 10 years, sometime around the year 2012, a new form of humanity would emerge upon the earth as a result of nanobio infocogno. Here's where I would have talked about the esoteric side of the 2012 and can't. Time magazine, some believe it'll be here sooner than later. The School of Law, Birkbeck, talking about how they're going to have to develop new crime scene investigation methods because future crime scenes perpetrated by part human, part animals might behave in ways that are so uncharacteristic as to cause what we know about forensics and profiling to fly out the door. It's already been illustrated and proved by Professor Yvonne Balaban at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, who injected developing brain matter from quail into chickens, and the resulting chickens exhibited the head bobs and vocal trills of quail, which illustrated that very complex behavior patterns can be transferred from one species to another species as a result of genetic engineering. And so as we start blending ourselves with animals, by the way, the newest report from the Jasons, the $100 genome, that's what they talk about. Genotypes and phenotypes. And phenotypes is how your genetic makeup is expressed. And what they're saying is, as we begin to alter ourselves, animals, and everything else at their genetic level, they're phenotypically going to change. They're going to behave differently, and we've got to be careful. In fact, the Global Governance 2025, this is from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the United States, only 12 months ago, working with European Institute of Security Studies. And when talking about what could be the trigger event, and this before 2025, in the next 14 years, what could be the trigger event that would set in motion the need for all of the nations of the world to have to hurriedly come together under the umbrella of one global government in mutual defense of one another against some unprecedented threat? Well, on page 35, it starts getting interesting. Few experts believe governance instruments are adequate for the challenges of human behavior and association alterations. Direct modification of DNA at fertilization is widely researched with the goal of removing defective genes. However, discussions of future capabilities open the possibility for designing humans with unique physical, emotional, or cognitive abilities. And this report literally tells us this is the highest level of intelligence. The U.S. Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the European Institute of Security Studies telling us that within 14 years, the trigger event that could cause all of the nations of the world to have to come together in mutual defense of one another is the new form of proto-humans that we are preparing to unleash upon ourselves. Well, in designing humans with physical, emotional, and cognitive abilities, I believe we could be witnessing the unfolding of biblical prophecy. I don't have time to explain all these ways in which we could. I believe that it has something to do with the days of Noah, when our Lord's closest disciples said, "Tell us, what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the aeon, the end of the age?" He gave them a series of signs that ended saying, as it was in the days of Noah. Well, I think most of you know what happened in the days of Noah, and it didn't end very well then, and I'm afraid it might not end very well this time around either. But even if you don't buy that, neither God nor evolution is allowing what man is doing now in biotechnology and genetics. As a result, I fear we may learn the Brundlefly lesson. I don't have time to tell it, do I? Have you seen the old movie The Fly? And there's a scientist by the name of Seth Brundle, and he's conducting teleportation experiments. And one day, a housefly gets into machine A, and he doesn't know it. And he gets into machine A, pushes the button, and is discombobulated. Then he's remolecularized in machine B. What he doesn't know is that his genetics have been combined with the genetics of a common housefly. And shortly thereafter, he becomes the transhumanist dream come true. Lightning quick agility, superhuman strength, the sexual proclivities of an African lion. But then something else happens, and he mutates into a horrific monster, and he has to be destroyed. Jeff Goldblum, who starred in a remake of that film, starred in the Jurassic Park films. And I love Jurassic Park 1, where he's in the back of a Jeep. And I forget, I think the guy's driving, the girl's in the front seat. This Weasley character that he's playing by the name of Ian Malcolm, who's a scientist that subscribes to the chaos theory, is sitting in the back of that Jeep leaning forward as they're being chased down the road by a giant man-eating Tyrannosaurus Rex. And he says to the people in front of him, "Who in the world thought this was a good idea?" Yeah, who thinks this is a good idea, what we're talking about? Members of government, military, philosophy, futurists, the science community, academia. And one thing is certain, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a war now. And I wished I could tell you about these various events in which I've been personally attacked, including by the authors of the National Science Foundation report, Ethics of Human Enhancement, 25 Questions and Answers, who were horrified by my terrible behavior. You know what I did? I put out an open letter to Christian leaders on biotechnology and the future of man, in which I was saying, awake to this issue. It was picked up by Wired magazine and published, where the writers of this report, which I also told them to read this report, where they're celebrating how we're going to become aquatic creatures and live beneath the sea. What's that little Disney film? We're going to all live beneath the sea. Well, they're celebrating that, and I said, you need to know where your tax dollars are going and what's happening, because if you're not awake to this issue, then you are allowing them to define the rules by which this is going to unfold. But if you get involved, you already outnumber them, and you're already a smarter. So just awake to the issue. Well, they hated that. They didn't want me telling conservative Christians that they ought to know what's going on. Just pay no attention to that man behind the veil. Christians need to get involved. Don't wait on your church or pastor to do the job. Employ your particular talent or strength to engage. That's from politics to prayer, from media to education. Whatever it is you do, make the issue of transhumanism some part of your sphere of influence, because this is coming faster than most people are prepared for. Thank you.
This has been Artificial Intelligence and the Return of the Nephilim, presented by Tom Horn. To receive a free catalog of over 250 awesome Bible studies on DVD or CD, all using and defending a literal translation of the Bible, information on upcoming Bible conferences in your area, or details of our missionary outreach and trips to Israel, call Compass at 1-800-977-2177 24 hours a day, or visit us on the web at compass.org.